What's going on, guys? Welcome to the next Dark Souls video. You know how I said that I wouldn't do any more of these? Yeah, well, I'm a nerd and certainly don't have anything better to do with my time. So that being said, don't expect a list for Dark Souls 2 because number one, that game has 41 bosses and editing that would be a bitch. And number two, that game was long and dreadful, so I intend to never touch it again. And that lands us here with Dark Souls 3, my first Souls game that I played and the first one that I made a ranking video for. Do note that this is my 5th or 6th playthrough, so my opinions now are probably more valid than they were before. Number 25, Deacons of the Deep. Of course, as with every other Souls game, there needs to be at least one boss consisting of common enemies with a glorified health bar. This is the Prowling Magus and Congregation of Dark Souls 3, but it's at least a little more fun. The Deacon that grows red is the target. After smacking that one enough, the boss himself appears, only to be just as much of a pushover as his denizens. The only real danger in this fight is being cursed, which did happen to me once or twice because I had no idea you could so easily prevent it. Just kill the Deacons who are summoning the curse orb and you're golden. This fight reminds me of Celestial Emissary from Bloodborne, only this boss is even easier. Number 24, Ancient Wyvern. This is a gimmick boss in which you'll either hate it with a burning passion or actually think it's pretty epic. I'm certainly in the former. The other Souls games brought us memorable dragons like Calamy and Sin, but here all you have to do is sprint past some mildly annoying man-serpents and execute a plunging insta-kill. It is possible to mistime your plunge and fall to your death, but does that really make this joke of a boss more difficult? Of course not. Ancient Wyvern is a lame fight and I think I've only ever died to it once or twice. Number 23, Ludex Gundyr. For a long time I struggled to pronounce this dude's name, but I think I finally have it right. And so we come to the first boss in Dark Souls 3, and he's actually a mild challenge, at least compared to the Asylum Demon in the Last Giant. Phase 1 is largely simple. He gives you massive windows to attack in between highly telegraphed swings, and sprinting across the area gives you ample time to heal if you are hit. Phase 2 slightly ups the difficulty, considering his entire body becomes a hitbox. I have certainly died to this boss during previous playthroughs due to recklessness and issues with conserving Estus, but during our most recent battle I found him to be a breeze. Number 22, Yhorm the Giant. Yhorm the Giant is an epic boss, no doubt, but he's definitely not difficult. I'll be honest here and admit that I'm terrible at equipping the Storm Ruler while Yhorm is attacking me, so I usually homeward bone back to the bonfire after grabbing it. Is that cheating? It's an item in the game, so I'm going to say no. When using the Storm Ruler, you really just need a bit of patience to find time to charge the weapon up and strike. It only takes about 5 hits, and Yhorm's swings are highly telegraphed and easy to roll through. Let's just add him to the list of easy giants to kill and move on. Number 21, Vordt of the Boreal Valley. This fat-ass brute is a nice step up in difficulty from Gundyr. He's a bit more tanky and has quite the aggressive demeanor in Phase 2. The trick here is to get behind him and mercilessly pierce his butthole with your blade. The only dangerous moves Vordt really possesses are the Frost Breath and the Stampede of Death. Do try to avoid these as much as possible, because at this stage in the game you likely don't have enough HP to survive more than 1 or 2. I like to believe that I only died to Vordt because I rushed through the high wall without leveling much, but maybe it's also a bit of I suck at this game. Number 20, High Lord Wolnir. Welcome to the infamously worst boss in Dark Souls 3. I actually thought he was kinda cool at first upon noticing that this giant skeleton only takes damage to the glowing bracelets around his spindly wrists, but this fight quickly becomes exceedingly annoying when the colossal skeleton emits an enormous cloud of poisonous gas that can kill you before you even have time to blink. The reason I hate this fight is because it basically requires the perfect blend of patience and aggression. If you're too aggressive, you'll get sucked into his lethal flatulence, and inhaling it will spell instant death. If you're not aggressive enough, he'll grow bored and summon a squad of skeleton skanks to distract you. I'm getting needle flashbacks here. Anyways, dreadful boss, and honestly a moderate pain in the ass if you ask me. Number 19, Crystal Sage. This boss is basically Pinwheel 2.0. If the goal was for the Sage to be more difficult, then mission successful. But this is by no means a very enjoyable experience. Phase 1 has you running around the map to deal damage to the teleporting sage. During this phase, the boss is largely docile, relying on infrequent spells and a pathetic melee swipe to delay your efforts. Phase 2 is where things get annoying. The sage will spawn a bunch of clones all around the map, but unlike Pinwheel, these clones can and will damage you. Some people like to kill the clones, but I found it easier to just use the pillars to block their magic and rush the OG sage only. Although I don't find this boss to be particularly difficult, it's very possible to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and get pelted with a swarm of deadly magic. Number 18, Curse-Rotted Greatwood. One of the grossest bosses in the game is this giant puss-filled pimpletree. At least he spreads his legs for you so you can get right to work on treating his genital warts. I like to do this by coating my blade in fire and recklessly slicing through them like a hot knife through butter. At a certain point in the fight, the Greatwood ass crashes the floor, sending you both into the underworld. In addition to this, the Skankwood grows a huge fleshy arm from its crotch, which can inflict nasty grabbing and crushing attacks. Avoiding this boss's moves is no easy task, considering it can use its entire body as a hitbox to interrupt your attempt on its life. So just do what I did and power your way to the finish as quickly as possible to avoid much of a headache. Number 17, Halflight Spear of the Church. This is one of two annoying NPC bosses in this game. In this one, you're guaranteed to fight both enemies at the same time, but only one of them poses much of any danger to you. The Painting Guardian rarely rushes you with melee, which is a relief considering Halflight can use magic and melee, both of which are quite annoying. There really isn't much else to say about this fight, it's just kinda bland. Halflight staggers easily, so just R1 spam him and use the pillars to block the magic if you need to heal. I should mention that this can be an online PvP fight, but obviously I'm not going to rank that due to the vast range of different skill levels you'd experience. Number 16, Old Demon King. I'll get it out of the way right now. I hate the Old Demon King. He's the most unoriginal, uninspired boss in the game, and gives me horrid flashbacks to the Demon Fire Sage in Dark Souls 1. He does have a few new fire AoEs that appear as a ring, but I found these new moves to be more obnoxious than inventive. I know some people think this dude is easy, so maybe I just suck at fighting him, but I always seem to mistime my rolls, and there really isn't a lot of room for error in this battle because he hits like a tank unless you wait for late game to fight him. At least he's optional. In fact, I normally skip the Old Demon King. The footage you're watching is from a previous playthrough, so that's why I'm doing so terrible. That being said, in my most recent playthrough I did go back and wreck him after I did all the other bosses, but there's no point in putting that in here because obviously that fight is a joke. Number 15, Champion Gravetender and Greatwolf. Most of the DLC bosses in Dark Souls 3 are cool, but not this one. It first pits you up against a lame, easy to stagger NPC with a pack of annoying, agile wolves. This fight usually goes one of two ways. Either you have the damage output necessary to kill the Gravetender before the Greatwolf jumps in and get an easy victory, or you don't kill the Gravetender in time and are forced to fight both at the same time. I died a few times for this precise reason. The Greatwolf isn't too much worse to deal with, but he is fast and hits hard, and ganks are never fun in the first place, so please, kill the Gravetender first and save yourself a headache. Number 14, Oceiros the Consumed King. This dude is one hell of a wild card. The fight normally goes one of two ways for me. Either I kill the boss in 30 seconds or it kills me in 30 seconds. I feel like Oceiros is highly RNG dependent. Many of his close range attacks are easy to manage assuming you try to attack from behind. But if he decides to be an absolute dick and uses AoE, cross-map charge, and sloppy hitboxes, you're probably going to get slightly fucked up. To this day, I struggle to form a consistent opinion on this boss, but I think number 15 is a nice place for him to sit, considering I haven't died to him in over 2 playthroughs. Number 13, Dragonslayer Armour. Finally, we've reached our first mildly difficult boss. This is one that looks very similar to Dragonslayer Ornstein, but he plays more like Smo. He's a big dude that uses slow, calculated axe swings and shield slams to break you down when you least expect it. I feel like this boss telegraphs his attacks so much that I often find myself dodging too early. Nevertheless, his moveset is very learnable, and you can easily heal yourself in between his combos if you find yourself sucking at all. The fight does become slightly more annoying when the giant wispy moths floating around start flinging shit at you, but as I said, only mildly. This is an enjoyable duel, but never one that I struggled with personally. Number 12, Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. Yet another wildcard boss. Aldrich has a varying moveset in which some attacks are simple to avoid and others are a pain in the ass. Let's start with the Hurricane of Arrows. Don't lie, we've all died to this attack once or twice because getting caught in it spells instant death unless you get lucky and roll out just in time. But a decent amount of awareness makes it easy to avoid the tracking projectiles in the first place. Next there's the melee swings. They're decently telegraphed and only really pose a threat because of the boss's tendency to float around in an attempt to confuse you as to whether or not he's actually going to do it. Then there's the magic. This move ain't that bad either. During the second phase, Aldrich tends to attack with more haste, resulting in you having a good chance of receiving more than one attack at the same time. This was another tough one to rank, but I'm comfortable enough in my ability to beat Aldrich that I don't think he's quite top 10 worthy. Number 11, Champion Gundyr. This boss is cool as hell, but let's face it, he's basically just a far more aggressive ludex with a few new moves. The thing is, those new moves such as the Charge 360 Smackdown are extremely difficult to avoid. In addition to this, the champion rarely allows you time to heal, so you need to time everything extremely skillfully to succeed. I should mention that you can parry this guy, and yeah, that probably moves him back a spot for me, but I don't personally use this strategy because his versatile moveset makes it incredibly difficult for me to time it right. I'd say that this is the first boss on the list that I really struggle with, particularly in my first few runs. Nowadays, he's not so bad. But then again, none of the bosses gave me too much trouble on this run. Number 10, Abyss Watchers. The Watchers are a fan favorite, and their difficulty is most certainly a part of the reason why. The fight starts out with one Watcher attacking you with moves very reminiscent of the NPCs in Bloodborne. Before long, a second one joins the fray, and then a third Watcher? Don't worry, Mr. Red Eyes is on your side. His attacks can still damage you, but he's a nice distraction while you take on the other Watcher man to man. Once he's down, their life essence resurrects a final cinder-ridden Watcher to make for a pretty epic phase 2. The attack patterns here are pretty similar to the first phase, but damn do they hit harder. Although both phases do stagger quite a bit, these bastards are so fast and agile that I find it difficult to keep up with them. To this day I struggle with the Abyss Watchers, sometimes to the point of giving up and doing the Cathedral of the Deep first before returning to Fair & Keep to finally crush them. Number 9, Dancer of the Boreal Valley. This is a cool ass fight. The Dancer is probably the most majestic boss in Dark Souls 3, but don't let that fool you. She has some of the longest, deadliest, least telegraphed combos in the entire game. The golden rule here is to attack her from behind. Stay near those gorgeous hips and you'll remain safe from some of her swings. But I won't lie, a lot of this fight just involves learning to time your rolls correctly. Even some of her deadliest combos can be avoided with enough practice. That's not to say she's not a massive challenge to beat, just a very learnable one. Number 8, Twin Princes. In this fight, you get to watch as two cripples take turns beating your character to a pulp. During my early runs, I struggled a lot with this boss, but with a lot of practice, I must say I think I've gotten pretty good at it. During phase 1, I like to lock onto Lorian in case he teleports. From there, it's just a matter of dodging his 2 to 3 swing combos, getting a hit or two in, rinse and repeat. Sometimes it can be difficult to tell just how much time you have to attack back, but I generally found it to be not too difficult to back off and heal unless he decides to be a dick and teleport to you immediately. Phase 2 spices things up with Lothric climbing onto his brother's back to add annoying magic attacks to the mix. The other twist is that to win the fight you have to actually kill Lothric. You can kill Lorian as many times as you want, but he gets revived as long as Lothric is breathing. This makes for one hell of an endurance battle, but much like the Dancer, very learnable.
Dear brother, mark my words, Ashen One. You remain among the accursed.
Number 7, Pontiff Sulyvahn. This has got to be one of the most unpredictable bosses in the entire series. His attacks are erratic as hell, making the roll timings extremely difficult to land. In addition to this, Pontiff does insane damage and has unrelenting aggression similar to Champion Gundyr. In phase 2, he creates a clone that telegraphs exactly what he's about to do. I like to keep the clone alive. Although he can hit you, it's very helpful to know what to expect from the dude with a health bar. You can parry Sulyvahn, and critical hits do a massive amount of damage to him, but I struggled so much with the timing that I gave up and just bested him the old-fashioned way. This strategy is certainly much more difficult, but still doable. Number 6, Demon Prince. What prevents this one from being a truly awful gank like Lud and Zalin is the fact that the demons take turns being in a frenzied attack state, while the other one limps around the arena like a wounded deer. Pro tip here, kill the demon in pain first. The second phase demon can have a different moveset depending on who you off first, and yes, there is definitely a difference. The reason I used to struggle with this boss a lot is number 1, the insane amount of health that the two different phases have collectively, making conserving your Estus quite difficult, and 2, I'm really freaking bad at managing the demons in phase 1. Call me a noob, but I panic and get hit by the toxic gas far more often than I should, which pretty much costs you the fight unless you've got purple moss clumps handy. Still, this is another one that I used to get my ass kicked by consistently, but with a lot of practice, I've pretty much mastered it. Number 5, Soul of Cinder. If this isn't the perfect final boss to end the series on, then I don't know what is. Like most bosses, this guy has 2 phases, but phase 1 is divided into even more moveset variants that he can randomly switch between. Because of that, you need to memorize a shit ton of attacks in order to effectively conserve Estus and not get your ass pummeled. The variant that I find to be the most annoying is the fucking Falchion. As if the fight wasn't already epic enough, once you down him you'll realize that was only part 1. Soul of Cinder then arises from his seeming demise, only to turn into Gwen 2.0. Hell, even the music plays in the background. Only this time you can't parry. I recommend keeping your distance whenever he uses moves with a flame aura, and pick your openings carefully because this is another truly aggressive foe worthy of his placement. Number 4, Nameless King, and the hardest boss in the main game remains the Nameless King. Despite this, I've actually found that he becomes easier each time I play through the game. Before you can face the king himself, you need to kill his dragon while he rides it around the arena, flinging lightning bolts at you like it's nothing. Honestly, I find this phase to be just as difficult as the second because of how impossible it is to keep the beast on your screen long enough to tell what it's about to do. Once you finally do beat the dragon, the king himself drops down to unleash some truly punishing vengeance on you. His attacks aren't too difficult to dodge, but they hit hard as hell, even to the point of two-shotting you if you get hit with the right combo. So in a sense, this is another fight that requires virtually no mistakes if you want to make it to the end with any Estus remaining. I'm ashamed to say that I actually got so unranged by this boss one time that I smashed one of my controllers, so please, do take breaks if you find yourself getting as frustrated as I was. Number 3, Slave Knight Gael. This is my personal favorite boss in the game. He's quite similar to Nameless King in that he's not terribly quick, but it's a long-ass fight, and any mistake can mean losing the battle, not to mention that this man has 3 completely different phases, and has one of the largest health pools of any boss in the game. The first phase is only mildly difficult. Gael telegraphs his 2 to 3 swing combos pretty well in advance, and it's as simple as learning to dodge them and getting 1 or 2 hits in when possible. This becomes far more difficult during the second and third phase, in which Gael becomes more aggressive, more relentless, and more deadly. Some of his combos change completely, and in my opinion, he might just have the biggest learning curve in the game. But that only makes it all the more satisfying when you do finally slay him like the badass you are. In this playthrough, I managed to do it on my first try. This is a testament to the phrase practice makes perfect. Even the hardest bosses in the Souls series can become quite manageable once you've fought them enough times. Number 2, Sister Friede and Father Ariandel. I always thought it was Friede, but in the game she refers to herself as Friede. Speaking of bosses who have 3 different phases, here's another one. And it's one of the most difficult bosses I've ever faced in any game ever. One thing I hate about this boss is how deceptive it is. Each phase has a separate health bar, which constantly fools you into thinking that you've won the battle the first time you progress. You start out fighting Friede only. She uses a lot of mildly dangerous Bloodborne-ish combos that do feel a bit fast-paced for Dark Souls combat mechanics. But trust me, it's nothing compared to what's to come. The benefit here is that Friede staggers quite a bit, so the only thing you might really struggle with is her invisibility move. It can be really tough to track her even if you're locked on, and not tracking her can be a real problem if you get hit by the coming move. Phase 2 adds Father Ariandel to the fray. This part is largely similar to Ornstein and Smo, with Friede being the fast agile warrior and Ariandel being the slow but hard-hitting fatty. The two have a collective health bar, and I personally find Ariandel to be easier to deal with. Just watch out for Friede as she remains a pain in the ass through this entire fight. Finally, Phase 3 presents you with a buffed Friede. Not much more to say other than good luck for this phase, because it's pretty much like Phase 1, only she staggers less, has harder hitting combos, and has some additional moves that now have AoEs. Wait, Josh, if you struggle with this boss enough to die 8 times, then why is it not number 1? Well, call me stupid, but for 8 attempts I was dead set on killing this boss with the sellsword twin blades. After becoming moderately frustrated, I switched to the Murakamo and beat it on my first try. I guess it helps to have a weapon that can stagger Friede from a distance without getting caught by her equally long-range scythe. Woo! I feel like I just wrote an essay on this one boss. Probably deserved it though. Number 1, Darkeater Midir. As if Dark Souls 3 needed to outdo itself again, there's an even harder boss. Not only is Midir difficult, but he's also the most epic dragon you'll fight in the entire series. First off, the level of hit points on this dude is insane. I've had fights with him that lasted upwards of 10 minutes. In addition to this, you deal minimum damage to anything but the head, so staying front and center is a necessity. The good news is that Midir's melee attacks aren't horribly difficult to dodge once you learn the varying timings. He has some front arm swipes and a charge attack that wastes a good 30 seconds of your time as you sprint across the map to try to catch up with him, but I find both of these to be somewhat manageable. The fire breath, however, can be a problem if you're caught off guard. Some people like using shields, but I prefer simply rolling through or away from them depending on which variant of the move Midir uses. The reason this fight is so damn hard is honestly mainly because it can take a long ass time and every mistake you make brings you one step closer to being out of healing items. This dude also hits just as hard as any other of the bosses this far up on the list. And all that right there is why Midir lands here in the top spot. And that brings us to the end of the video. After playing through this game several times, I think I've come to the conclusion that it has some of the best bosses in the series. Sure, there are some hiccups like Wolnir and Greatwood, but at least they tried some new mechanics and went out with a blast. As always guys, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Also be sure to let me know what your ranking is in the comments. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.